Hello everyone, it's Annie and I'm here today with my gigantic May reading wrap-up. I read 28 books this month, all but one of them being by Asian authors for AAPI month, and I read a little bit more than I had planned to, let's just put it that way. So I have a lot to get through. I have this huge stack and this is not even all of it, let me just tell you. This is like insane. So as always, I'm going to start with my least favorite book and go all the way up to my favorite book of the month. So make sure you watch until the end and let's go. Okay, first book is Walking Practice by Do-Ki Min. This is by a non-binary Korean author and this is originally written in Korean and translated into English. And I read a lot of translated books this month and a lot of very, very short books this month. That's why I read so many books, or how I read so many books. This is a sci-fi horror book about this weird alien that you see on the cover, transforming into human forms, various human forms, and basically eating humans. But it's kind of gross. Not really what I was expecting. There's a lot of body horror in it. It's definitely an allegory, and I appreciate that. It's about, you know, how you look on the outside, and it's an allegory for like the human condition, and it's an existential crisis and stuff. But it was just really gross, because what the alien does is that it goes and like finds people to hook up with online and then it eats them. And it was just, it got a little bit repetitive. I think it could have been more successful as just a short story and still have conveyed what it wanted to convey. So unfortunately, this was only a 2-star for me, but we're only going up from here. And then we have a 2.5 or a 3-star. Haven't decided. Greek Lessons by Han Kang. And now I read all of Han Kang's other works. I loved Human X. That's one of my favorite books. And I didn't love The Vegetarian. If you love The Vegetarian, you will really like this book. I just don't think I'm smart enough for this book. It follows two people. One is a professor of ancient Greek, and the other is his student, this woman on the cover, who is mute, and she's like lost her ability to speak for psychological reasons. And this professor is going blind. So they kind of come together in the end. It's kind of billed as a romance, but it's not a romance. So if you're going into it looking for that, don't. I wasn't. I was going into it because it revolved around language learning, and I really like that in a story. This book is weird. It's really, really weird. It tells the story of two ordinary people brought together at a moment of private anguish. The fading light of a man losing his vision, meeting the silence of a woman who has lost her language. Slowly, the two discover a profound sense of unity, their voices intersecting with startling beauty as they move from darkness to light. Yeah, it does say it's like a tender love story, which I guess it could be read that way. It's good. I think I would rate it a 3, actually. Yeah, let's say this starts off the 3-star pack. I liked it. I just don't think I was smart enough to get it. There was just, if you're familiar with Hong Kong's writing, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit opaque at some places, but I'm happy I read it. Another 3-star, Cursed Bunny, which is also translated from Korean. This is a collection of short stories by Bora Chung. This is really, really popular, especially on Book Talk. I am a little bit disappointed that I only rated it 3 stars, but it is a short story collection, which is why. Because some of the short stories in here, not gonna give spoilers, but like Cursed Bunny, the titular story, and also the first story in here, and there's another story called Frozen Finger. There were some really, really stellar ones. Like those ones I would give 5 stars. They were amazing, they were creepy, very, very unique stuff. However, there were some stories that just really fell flat for me, especially one of the last ones, which was called The Ruler of the Winds and Sands. It just didn't fit. It is a straight up fantasy story. It really it kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. It didn't fit the vibes of the other horror stories. And there were also just some stories that I did not care about at all and that I felt like I wanted it to just be over so I could get to the next story. So unfortunately, yeah, this was a mixed bag for me, but I do definitely still think it's worth a read, especially if you like translated literature or horror stories. The next 3-star book I want to talk about is also a short story collection. It is Where We Go When All We Were Is Gone by Sequoia Nagamatsu, who wrote one of my most favorite books of last year, I believe, which is How High We Go in the Dark. That was an amazing sci-fi book. Not really a short story collection, but it is told in a series of vignettes. However, this is a short story collection with very separate stories. And I really liked some stories, like the first story starts off with a daughter writing letters to her mother who died trying to basically be an advocate for kaiju, like their animal safety or animal rights advocates. She was a kaiju rights advocate, and I just thought that was so cool. Really creative story. There were some stories like that, but most of the stories were just kind of forgettable for me, unfortunately. So I rated that one a 3, honestly solely because of that kaiju story. I thought that was wonderful. But I'm definitely going to read more from Sequoia Nagamatsu. I think he is an amazing author, especially for sci-fi and fantasy. And then I also want to talk about the sole middle grade I read this month, which is also the only middle grade I've read this year, which is kind of strange for me because I tend to read more than that. But this is Hamra and the Jungle of Memories by Hannah Alkaf. I've read Hannah Alkaf before. I've read the book that she came out with about Scrabble, and also the book she came out with about the, I can't remember the title of it, the girl with OCD who's taking place during Malaysian riots, I think in the 60s, but don't hold me to that. I can't remember the title. But I like Hannah Alkaf. This book was a 3. It was a retelling of the Red Riding Hood story, kind of, with a Malaysian spin to it, of course, which I really enjoyed. I liked the setting of the rainforest. I liked the tiger instead of the wolf. The cover is obviously adorable and gorgeous. However, Hamra was awful, okay? I know a lot of middle grade stories have the lesson, okay? There's always a big lesson that you're supposed to take from it, and usually the main character is kind of either spoiled or selfish, and then they learn not to be, okay? That's very common, but Hamra was just an awful person. And like, I don't understand why her best friend was friends with her, because she treated him horribly. Like, girl, she was awful to him. The other thing that kind of annoyed me about this book is my problem, but it's also a problem with marketing. So this book is very much a COVID story. This is set during the lockdown, the first wave of COVID, and that was not advertised. That was not said in any of the descriptions, any of the marketing of it, and it was really shoehorned in there, and it kept being stated over and over again about wearing masks and staying inside and how she wished everything could turn back to normal. And I went into this looking for a fun middle grade fantasy book, not to be transported back in time to COVID lockdown. I just think that that is a problem that I see a lot of reviewers of this book having, and I just think it's, you know, come on, publishers, you need to be honest with your readers, okay? Tell them what they're getting into, otherwise they're gonna be unhappy. So yeah, just be warned of that. There's also an Alzheimer's storyline in here that I think was handled very well, but obviously check content warnings. But it was a good story, it just wasn't one that I would like to read again. Let's just say that. And then we have the most recent book that I read, which is Just As You Are by Camille Kellogg. This is the only book I didn't read by an Asian author this month because it was my Sapphic Book Club's pick for the month of June. Or no, the month of May, sorry. This book is a loose retelling of Pride and Prejudice with New York City lesbians instead, which I love that concept. I love Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite books and movies, so any retelling of it I usually jump on and I want to read. And because it's sapphic, of course, I really wanted to read this. It was well written, and the gist of the story is that Liz works at a small LGBT magazine in New York City, and then she gets the news that the company wants to shut them down, but then they are saved because these minority investors come and kind of buy their magazine. And the minority investor is Daria Fitzgerald and her friend Bailey. So we have Darcy and Bingley in Daria and Bailey. And it's really, really good until around 70% of the way through. Because it was following all the plot beats of Pride and Prejudice. I was like, yes, this is so good, this is creative, it follows the story really well, while also putting a unique spin on it. I thought there was a really good balance between the romance and the work drama, but then it veers off the rails. I was really not happy with the direction that it took. I don't want to give spoilers, but there is so much melodrama, and I just don't understand what was going on. Like, there was just so much melodrama, so much fighting for no reason, so much crying, so much will they, won't they, so much drama, and it was just too much. I really wish that it could have just stayed a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, because that's what it's advertised as. Again, you gotta stick to what you advertised it as. So yeah, the ending, I was not happy, but I really enjoyed it. It was gonna be a 5 stars, and now it's a 3 stars, so you see how much the ending kind of really made me angry. But I thought it was good. It's good for a contemporary romance, which I don't normally love, but I think it definitely does have its audience. If you really love gay contemporary romances, then don't overlook this. I do think that a lot of people would enjoy it. And now we have some more translated works. First we have Heaven by Miyako Kawakami. I read Breasts and Eggs by her and I adored it. I gave that a 5 stars. It was one of my favorite books of last year. Heaven is a novella. It's quite short, and it's about a boy and a girl in Japanese schools who are really terribly bullied by their peers. This is a story that definitely is advertised correctly. It is what it says on the tin. It is about that, and it's very hard to read. There is one scene in particular. I really implore you to check trigger warnings before reading this, because it is extremely upsetting. So yeah, I understand what Miyako Kawakami was going for, and I think she succeeded, but I don't know if I was the right audience for it. I really appreciated reading it because it was set in the 90s in Japan, so that was a little bit of a different setting, which was interesting. And because I taught in Japanese schools, I did like being transported back there. There were a lot of things that felt familiar to me, but yeah, the bullying and everything was very upsetting. So I'm rating it a 3, just for pure enjoyment value. But I think Miyako Kawakami is an amazing author, and she definitely succeeded in what she went out to do, and I definitely want to read more from her, so do with that what you will. And then another Japanese translated work, which is Idle Burning by Rin Usami. And this is a very short, the audiobook was only 3 hours, very strange little novella about a girl who is obsessed with a Japanese pop star. He's her oshi, and she's like an obsessive fan. And Idle Burning refers to the fact that in the beginning of the book, this idol that she worships gets involved in a scandal where he punches one of his fans. And instead of being like upset by that, she immediately defends him, and like she wants him to be okay, even though he was the one who assaulted someone. It was very interesting. I used to be a really big K-pop fan, so I found that there's a lot of similarities to the K-pop fan world, which I am not really a big part of anymore, thankfully, because it just got too crazy for me. It was a weird book, but I think it was definitely worth the read. It was 3 stars because there just wasn't so much depth to it. I could see it a little bit, like the main character has some troubles going on at home, some troubles with school and her health, both mentally and physically. But we don't really get to see a lot of it because it's so short. I think it was good. It was good, but it was a 3. Okay, another novella by Premi Mohammed, which is The Annual Migration of Clouds. This is a sci-fi dystopian story. It's very, very short. It is about this dystopian future when people, hear me out, when people have this parasitic thing in their brains that sometimes makes them act weird and sometimes like lays dormant and doesn't. And yes, if you like The Last of Us, you would like this book. It is very similar to the cordyceps virus. I liked this. It was creative with the world building and the dystopian future, but I didn't like how it was written. I don't know, it was just very confusing. I remember listening to it and being like, what is going on? I feel like things jumped all over the place. And the main character, I didn't really like following her. She gets the opportunity to go to this university and everybody wants to stop her because then she'd be leaving her family behind, but she feels like this is her only chance. And I don't know, I just didn't really care about her conflict. I thought, again, the world building, the virus, dystopian, very cool, but didn't really care about the rest of the plot. So yeah, it was a 3. The other 3 is An Ion Curtain by Anya Ao, which is a sci-fi story that is set in kind of a Cold War setting, like the Soviet Union versus America, but it's in the future and it's in space, which is very, very creative. That's why I wanted to read it, and you know, the title of Ion Curtain is very on the nose, but I really thought that it was creative. There's a lot to do with AI in it, which I think was cool, and there are queer characters, but other than that, it was very forgettable because you can tell that I'm forgetting things. So it was just not the best. I've seen people recommend it for fans of ancillary justice, which I don't understand the correlation at all because there's nothing similar about it. So basically there's this guy, this vigilante who steals something, and then he has like the space Soviets kind of going after him and his crew. And that's the story. It's very obviously setting up a series, which was not advertised. I thought this was a standalone, so I won't be continuing. Yeah, the story did not finish at the end, which was a little disappointing. I think that if it was a standalone, it could have been really tightened up and really made much better. But of course, I don't know Anya Ao's plans. So that's my opinion on Ion Curtain. I was just a little bit disappointed by it. Now, this one, I also rated a 3, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's a 3.5. This is Ghost Music by Anyu. A lot of these books I got from Libro FM as part of their influencer thing, where I get free listening copies, like advanced listening copies of audiobooks. So I took a lot of the books from there that I had kind of piled up that I had to read from the past few months or year, and this was one of them, and this was really good. It was very strange, very surreal. So it follows this woman who is in Beijing, and her name's Song Yan, and she gave up a career as a concert pianist, and she is now married to this guy named Bowen. And she gave up her career to teach piano lessons and have a family. But then he's like, just kidding, I don't want kids. And she gets mad. And then Bowen's mother comes to live with them from Yunnan province in China, and she starts saying, hey, I want a grandchild. And the wife is like, yeah, I want a child. And the husband is like, no. So he's not a very good guy. It was very weird because on top of this, there's this surreal stuff going on with mushrooms, okay? Which is cool. I think I really like that part. They get these mysterious packages full of mushrooms appearing at their door. It's addressed to someone else, but it keeps coming to them, so they keep using them and eating them. And then Sung Yang keeps having dreams where she's kind of trapped in a room with a mushroom, and I'm not going to say any more than that. It is very surreal. If you like really, really weird, tiny books, which I know a lot of people do, I would definitely read this. And if you like translated fiction, definitely read this. I think it was translated very well. It felt very smooth. I really liked it, and I definitely want to read Anyu's other book, which is Braised Pork. I think that's what it's called. I would definitely read that after this. Okay, so now we're on to the 4 stars, so we're getting to the good stuff. All right, first we have a horror novella, The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This is the first book I've read by Cassandra Khaw, and I really liked it. It was beautifully written. My review on Goodreads simply says, wow, Cassandra Khaw has a huge vocabulary, because they definitely do. Some people might say it's overwritten, but I really liked it. So this follows a mermaid, but it's not the kind of mermaid you think of, like the pretty fairy tale mermaid. This mermaid has teeth, and her daughters have burned down and eaten the kingdom of the prince who she married, who betrayed her. And yeah, so now they have to go on the run. And on the run, the mermaid meets this mysterious non-binary plague doctor character, and they have a mystery and darkness all their own. And they run into these children in like a snowy forest who are killing each other. And they're like, hey, what's going on here? And they go back to these children's village, and they see that this is a cult. And they basically have to figure out what is going on in this cult and how they can stop it and help the kids. If you liked the movie The Ritual, you'll really like this book. I love that movie, and I thought this book was really successful. There's a lot of body horror, a lot of really cool things. I think it was super creative. I think that what threw me off a little bit is that the main character's a mermaid, but she's like walking around. I don't know, but other than that, I think it was really cool. This is a very, very unique story, and I think more people should read it. And then we have another short story collection. This is Where the Wild Ladies Are by Aoko Matsuda, and this is translated from Japanese. It is a bunch of stories that are retellings of Japanese fairy tales, but are feminist, so they're feminist retellings. This was good. It was fine. There are some really weird stories, like the ghost of this girl's aunt is coming to her apartment and telling her everything that she's doing wrong and how she needs to lose weight and stuff. And then there are these 2 saleswomen who go to this guy's house and start like being really creepy. They're fine. They're fine stories. I think it was good. I read this because Noelle of Noelle 7 Pages read this for her book club way back when, and I did like it. I liked it. I appreciated it, but I think it was a little bit not memorable. Maybe I just should stay away from short story collections, because I feel like a lot of the stories just don't get enough time to really fully develop themselves into something memorable. But I know this is a very popular book, and I think it was good. It was good. The cover has this little frog on it, which I think was my favorite story. I'm not gonna give spoilers, but there's this story with this woman and this frog, or creature, and I really liked it. So yeah, there are some really, really good stories in here. Definitely check it out if you're looking for some good feminist Japanese storytelling. And then I read a book translated from Korean. This is a memoir called I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek Se-hee. This is a really popular book because some member of BTS was seen reading it. It was good. It was very good. Again, it is what it says on the tin. This is the author's kind of exploration of conversations from her therapy sessions, and I think it was very, very good. I used to read a lot of self-help or self-improvement books, and I've kind of gotten out of that because I read so many of them that they started all saying the same stuff. But I think that this one was very, very unique because it gives kind of an insight into Korean mental health care, and I think it was really, really good. Definitely an easy read. It was short, but there are some heavy topics in here, obviously, so look up content warnings, but I think this was really good and definitely worth the read. I found it very relatable because she is depressed and she kind of talks about feeling undeserving in her depression because a lot of people have it worse and things like that. And her conversations with her therapist really are very enlightening, and I think that a lot of people could get something out of this book. Okay, another really good sci-fi story that I read was The Deep Sky by Yume Kitase, and this is a sci-fi thriller. And it's very good. This stars Asuka, who is a Japanese-American girl who is the Japan representative of this ship of people who are basically escaping Earth and going to Planet X or whatever to start a new home for humanity because Earth's environmental collapse has gone too far and there really isn't going to be a way to save the planet. So Earth decided to send people from a whole bunch of countries, China, Russia, America, Japan, blah, 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 a whole bunch of places, and send them off, and they're going to continue humanity. And Asuka is one of them, but she feels kind of like an imposter because she was the last pick for the mission. She was like an alternate, and she also, even though she was chosen to represent Japan, she's only half Japanese, and she feels very inadequate because of that. I really, really liked that exploration of Asuka's identity and also Asuka's familial relationships back on Earth, who she feels estranged from. It was very, very interesting character work with Asuka. And then the thrilling aspect happens because Asuka and one of her crewmates are on a spacewalk and a bomb goes off and kills her crewmate, severely injures others, and hurts the ship a lot. And Asuka is a suspect and she has to find out who the bomber is. And it's a very, very good book. My gripe with it is that it is billed as adult. The characters are adults, they're young 20s, but it feels much more YA. I don't know if that was intentional because the story starts out with Asuka and her crewmates having woken up from a 10-year kind of cryosleep situation. So they are in their young 20s, but maybe mentally they are younger, and that was intentional. I don't know, but it did feel very YA, especially with kind of relationship melodrama going on a little bit. There is no romance in this, or no like big romance in this. There's just side romances, which I liked, but I just think it definitely felt more YA than adult, which I was a little bit disappointed with because it said it was an adult book. But I think this is definitely one to read when it comes out in July. I read an arc on NetGalley for this, and I really, really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a good sci-fi thriller, look no further. Next, for the 4 stars, we have Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee, who is of course the author of the Jade City trilogy. This was a very, very interesting little novella. This is about a girl who is paired with this giant bird called a roc, and they hunt manticores. And the main character has a vendetta against manticores because manticores killed her mother. And I think it was very, very interesting. However, I really would have loved to see the relationship between the main character and her roc, her bird, much more in depth, because I was kind of leaning towards this being like The Beast Player, which is a really good fantasy novel translated from Japanese that I highly recommend, about a girl who makes this connection with a big scary beast, and then they have this beautiful connection. And I could see little inklings of that kind of connection between the main character and her roc, but I just wanted more from it. I wanted more about the animals. Instead, we got really interesting world building, really interesting cultural stuff, which I'm surprised she could pack all into this tiny book. And we did get a little fledgling, pardon the pun, romance, which I wasn't bothered by. I did like it. I think it was handled very well. I really liked this. I liked this book a lot. Again, I honestly kind of wanted it to be longer because I just thought the world building and the concept was so interesting about having these giant birds. I thought it was great. It was action-packed where it needed to be. It was quiet where it needed to be. It was really successful. Really liked this one. Okay, next we have 2 translated Japanese novellas. There are a lot of those on this. First we have Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Tsukegawa, who I really enjoyed this. It was very quiet. It's a contemporary story about a man who runs this little sweets cart that sells dorayaki on the side of the road. And one day this old woman with like a half paralyzed face and gnarled fingers comes and she's like, I want to help you make better red bean paste. And he at first doesn't want to hire her, but then she's like, look, I'll work for like $3 an hour. I just want to do this. And so he lets her, and she makes amazing bean paste, and they have this really special, beautiful relationship. And there's something mysterious about the woman who I won't reveal because it is a spoiler. It's very important to the story. I think this was a very quiet novel, but it definitely deserves the hype that it gets. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. I just think it's really worth the read. The other one is a little bit different. It's The Woman in the Purple Skirt by Natsuko Imamura. And this has a really low rating on Goodreads. It's 3.3, but I liked it. I don't know, I liked it. It's kind of a thriller. It's a little bit psychological because the woman in the yellow cardigan kind of stalks the woman in the purple skirt, and she kind of manipulates her from afar until things get out of hand and she needs to intervene. And I really don't want to say more than that because it's very creepy. It's very well told. And I think that even though you don't really meet the woman in the purple skirt directly, you only see her from the woman in the yellow cardigan's point of view. It's just really well done, and she's a very interesting character. I really loved this, and if you're interested in Japanese literature in any way, you should read this because it was just an exciting story. It's very short too. The audiobook is like 4 hours long. It's definitely worth a listen or a read. Last 4-star, or maybe 4.25, is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, and I love this cover. I really liked this story. It was beautiful. It is about these 2 girls named Indigo and, should I tell you? Azure. Okay, it is about these 2 girls named Indigo and Azure, 2 blues, which is very interesting. I really like that. This is a very gothic story about a marriage. However, the marriage between Indigo and this man who she married at the beginning of the story isn't really the important part of the story at all, which I'm happy about. She marries a man who is poor, and she is like an heiress to a fortune, okay? That is Indigo. But she then learns that her estranged aunt, who she had grown up with, is dying, and she needs to return to her childhood home where, you know, she'll take care of her and then inherit everything. But her bridegroom is going to uncover secrets from her past, including her relationship with Azure. So this is a really gothic infused story. It's like a fairy tale-esque, a little bit of horror, but it was weird because I feel like this book was meant to be sapphic, but it wasn't. And I don't really understand that because I feel like if Roshani Chokshi just had leaned into that, like it was very sapphic. She didn't need to change anything about the story itself. It just needed to be said, like in its marketing, that it was sapphic. So that's why I'm a little bit confused about why this is billed as a romance story between Indigo and her new husband, because there was like no love there at all. The real romance is between Indigo and Azure. If this had been billed as a sapphic story, this would have been 5 stars. But I can't in good conscience do that because it wasn't advertised that way. And I don't really understand why. It's giving a little bit of homophobia, but I really like the story anyway, so I'm giving it 4 stars or 4.25. Please let me know what you think about this book because I am a little bit torn about it. I really want to know your thoughts about it, so definitely let me know in the comments. But I did really like this. It was very magical feeling, and the story is that Indigo and Azure believe that they are going to grow up and live in this other world that is kind of runs parallel to reality, and something happens with that world, and I don't want to go into any other spoilers, but it's just very magical and gothic, and I really liked it. Okay, now on to the 5-star books. There are a lot, so bear with me. First, I read George Takei's graphic memoir, They Called Us Enemy, which chronicles his time in the Japanese internment camps in America. Him and his family were sent to Arizona, I believe, or Arkansas, I'm sorry. And of course, I'm giving it 5 stars. It is a really well-told story. The illustrations are very good, and is told from George's, childhood self, of course, because that's who he was when he was in the camp. And it's just a really beautiful, really tragic story that I really think should be required reading in all American schools. And then I read an arc of Mammoths at the Gates by Nevo, which is the continuation of the Singing Hills cycle novella series about the non-binary cleric Chi. And in this book, it's not coming out until September, but in this book, Chi goes back to their monastery, and they get there and they see mammoths at the gate. And if you read some of the other novellas in the series, you know that mammoths are like war animals, so they're like, what is going on? And she finds that their head cleric has died while they were out on their journey. And it's a very touching novella. This is my favorite novella out of all of them, because it focuses on Chi and the monastery so much and the other monks and clerics. I loved this. It's very touching. It really deals a lot with grief and how different people grieve. And it's just a beautifully told story. I have no notes. I have no notes for this. I cannot wait until it comes out in September. It really blew me away. Nevo does not disappoint with this series. And then I read a very short story which is freely available on Tor.com, which is The Puppet Master by Kemi Ashingiwa, and I loved this. The cover is so sick. I really love the cover. Since it is so short and it's freely available, the link is in the description. You should go read it. The very short description I'm going to give, no spoilers, but it is about a banished warrior who teaches her treacherous uncle that once made, some oaths cannot be broken and some monsters cannot be chained. It's so cool. It's a very mixed genre story. It's some fantasy, some sci-fi, some horror, and it's sapphic, and it is beautiful. I love it. If you like The Unbroken, you would really like this book. I think it has very similar vibes. Well, it's a short story, but you catch my drift. It has very similar vibes, and I don't know how Kemi was able to have such great characterization and such a fleshed out world and great world building in such a short story. I don't know how she did that, but she did it. So this is definitely a short story that's worth reading. Now we have a book that was on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list, Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. This is a really touching, tragic story about a girl and her 2 brothers, her family, who escaped Vietnam as boat people and are put into refugee camps and then eventually sent to be resettled in the UK. And I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it is in the beginning of the book that the rest of her family, her other siblings and her parents were supposed to accompany them, but they died on the trip. So now the main character, the older sister, is basically the head of the household, and she's still a kid, but she has to take care of her two brothers. And it's a very nuanced story. Once their lives change in the UK, there's just a lot of really interesting things that Cecil Pinn says in this book. It is also very unique narrative-wise. Of course, it is a historical fiction story, but there are also side kind of peeks into nonfiction and memoir territory from the author herself, kind of explaining why she did certain things with the story and her own background or connection with the story. And I just think that was really done very, very well. It could have not been good, but it was very good. I really loved this little book. It's very short, it's worth it, and I think it should be on the short list of the Women's Prize for Fiction, but what do I know? And then we have Chlorine by Jade Song, which is so good. We're getting into my favorite books now. This was an amazing story, okay? It is contemporary, but fantastical, but horrific, and romantic, and it's sapphic, and it's so good. It is amazing. It's about a girl named Ren Yu who joins a competitive swim team in her school, and she becomes obsessed with swimming and obsessed with the water. And ever since she was a child, she's loved mermaids. She's kind of worshipped them. She has a shrine about them in her room, and she's obsessed with becoming a mermaid. Her true form is a mermaid. And she has some other stressors in her life, okay? Swimming is her whole identity. If she swims well, her mother will be proud of her. If she swims well, her coach will be proud of her, and she'll get to keep her friends. Her whole identity is about swimming, and it's very unhealthy, and it is an amazing story. And you might see where it's going with the whole mermaid thing, but there is body horror involved at the end, and I just loved every single second of this story. It's so good. There's non-binary representation, and it's just an amazing story. It's super unique, and I really wish, I hope that this wins some awards because it really deserves to. Okay, 4 more books. The next book is The Disaster Tourist, which is a translated Korean novella by Yoon Ko-eun. And this is an eco-thriller with a fierce feminist sensibility. So for 10 years, Yona has been stuck behind a desk as the coordinator for Jungle, a travel company specializing in vacation packages to destinations devastated by disaster and climate change. Her work life, however, is uneventful until trouble arises in the form of a sexual predatory colleague. So in order to forestall her kind of bringing this to HR, Jungle makes Yona the proposition of a paid vacation to the desert island, a fictional desert island of Mui, which is supposed to be around Vietnam. But Yona has to pose as a tourist, and during her vacation, she's supposed to be assessing whether her company should continue their partnership with this island because it's turning out to be kind of unprofitable. So she travels to the island whose major attraction is an underwhelming sinkhole, which is kind of a disappointment, especially for how expensive the trip is. However, she soon discovers that the resort's plan is to fabricate another catastrophe in the interest of regaining their good standing with the travel company. And it is horrific, and it is so good. It is so creative. You can really feel Yona's troubles and her strife to get off this island because she ends up being stranded on the island while this is happening, and it is so scary in a very thrilling, unique way. This is one of the most unique books I've ever read in my life. I don't understand why it has such a low rating on Goodreads. Don't believe it. A lot of translated books are rated low on Goodreads for whatever reason, but this one is not one to miss. This is so unique, and I really loved it. And honestly, I think it would make an amazing movie, and I really hope that it does become a film. Okay, next book is The Sword of Kaigen by Emma Wong. This was such a great standalone self-published fantasy. It deserves all the hype that it gets. It really, really does. It is chunky. Okay, that's why I read all those short books, okay? This is a chunky book. It took me a while. I loved it. It was slow moving at first, I will give you that. At first I was like, does this really deserve all the hype? But it does. Just keep reading it. It really, really does deserve all the hype. The character work in this book is some of the greatest character arcs that I have ever read, ever, in any book. Okay, so this is set on the edge of the Kaiganese Empire, where the most powerful warriors in the world reside. Okay, for centuries, the fighters of the Kusanagi Peninsula have held the Empire's enemies at bay, earning their treacherous spit of land the name the Sword of Kaigen. Born into Kusanagi's legendary Matsuda family, 14-year-old Mamoru has always known his purpose, to master his family's fighting techniques and defend his homeland. But when an outsider arrives and pulls back the curtain on Kaigen's alleged age of peace, Mamoru realizes that he might not have much time before he has to become the fighter he was bred to be. Even worse, the empire he was born to defend might stand on a foundation of lies. Okay, so that's Mamoru. He's not the main character, okay? That is misleading. He's not the main character. The main character is his mother, okay? Who is Misaki, who told herself that she left the passions of her youth behind when she married into the Matsuda house. Determined to be a good housewife and mother, she hid away her sword. But with her son asking questions, the threat of invasion looming on the horizon, and her frigid husband grating on her nerves, Misaki finds the fighter in her clawing its way back to the surface. I love Misaki. She is one of the best characters ever written. She is so amazing, okay? It's so good. It's amazing. The relationship between her and her husband is just one of the most realistically complicated relationships I've ever read, especially for a fantasy book. There are some things, like it's a little slow in the beginning, and there's some random sci-fi stuff thrown in there that I was like, what? But it's amazing. It's such a good story. If you like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you will like this because there's a lot of elemental magic going on. It's so good politically. The political system is very, very interesting. It's obviously based on Japan, and it is an amazing story. Misaki is so cool. I love her. I want to be her. And next we have another chunker, which is The Wolf of Oreñaro, which is a Filipino fantasy book, which I love. This was also originally self-published, but it got picked up by Orbit for a good reason, okay? This follows Queen Talien, who was born under the crumbling towers of her kingdom. She was the shining jewel and legacy of the bloody War of the Wolves. It nearly tore her nation apart, but her arranged marriage to the son of a rival clan heralds peace. However, he suddenly disappears before their reign can begin, and the kingdom is fractured beyond repair. Years later, he sends a mysterious invitation to meet. Talien journeys across the sea in hopes of reconciling their past. An assassination attempt, however, quickly dashes those dreams. Stranded in a land she doesn't know, with no idea whom she can trust, Talien will have to embrace her namesake. I love this, okay? She's so cool. I mean, if this cover doesn't convince you to read this book, I mean, look at her. She's so cool. She's such a strong warrior who doesn't take crap from anyone. She's so, so cool. I love this. This is a trilogy, and I'm definitely going to read the second book. This really surprised me too. I don't know. It has like a 3.6 something on Goodreads. I don't know why. It deserves way more. It's so good. This is a 5-star book, hands down. Talien was such an interesting character to follow. She's sympathetic while also being like, Talien, girl, what are you doing? Like things like that. It's just so entertaining while having you at the edge of your seat and having really, really interesting world building and politics going on. It's just such a well-built fantasy. that I loved. I loved every minute of it, of the audiobook, and I can't say anything bad about it. My favorite book, which also wins the most beautiful cover of this month, is Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea. This is such an amazing, amazing book. I ran to Barnes & Noble to buy it the day it was released, which was May 30th. I read an arc on NetGalley for it, and this book swept me off my feet. It was beautiful, starting with the cover, of course, which is by Yuko Art on Instagram. She's an amazing, amazing artist. Her art really just takes this to another level, okay? It's gorgeous. This follows a historical pirate queen. This is historical fiction with just the tiniest sprinkle of fantasy in there. I see it listed as fantasy on Goodreads. It's really not. It's historical fiction with just the teeniest sprinkle of fantasy. It is about a legendary pirate queen, a Chinese pirate queen named Shek Yung, who sees a Portuguese sailor slay her husband, who was also a feared pirate. And Shek Yung now has to act. She has to act swiftly or she has to die. So instead of mourning, Shek Yung launches a new plan. She immediately marries her husband's second in command in order to retain her power over her half of the fleet, because she's a woman and she has to, make sure that she's going to still have her power. But as Shek Yung vies for control over the army she knows she was born to lead, larger threats loom. The Chinese emperor has charged a brutal, crafty nobleman with ridding the South China Sea of pirates, and the Europeans have new plans for the area as well. Even worse, Shek Yung's cutthroat retributions create problems all their own. As she navigates new motherhood and the crises of leadership, she must decide how long she's willing to fight and at what price, or risk losing her fleet, her new family, and even her life. This book was a whirlwind, start to finish. Shek Yung is such an amazing character. She's also very similar, I think, to Rin from the Poppy War. If you loved the Poppy War, you will really like this book. I really implore you to read this. I see some people on Goodreads saying that the writing here is very dry and clinical. I don't know what they're saying. That is not true. This writing is gorgeous. The descriptions really make it come alive. It feels like you're there. You can smell the food, you can smell the flowers that she's describing, you can feel the salty sea air, and it's just a gorgeously written book, especially for a debut novel. This is an astounding work of art. I loved it. Shek Yung is such a really cool, evil, but evil because she has to be, female character, and I loved following her life. It follows her life from start to finish. It chronicles her rise to becoming the wife of this fearsome pirate and becoming a fearsome pirate all her own. And it is so good, and I love it, and it was my favorite book of the month. All right, all 28 books finished. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please, if you have a book recommendation that was your favorite book of May, definitely let me know. I really want to know some more recommendations, and if you have any thoughts about any of these books that I mentioned, please don't hesitate to let me know down in the comments. Alright, so if you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!